Another demo video. This one will show you, rather than sketching digitally, slightly different process for getting your document set up if you're sketching your project in a sketchbook or on paper with pen or pencil. Okay, so here was my thumbnail here, right there. Okay, so then I wanted to create. You had to create a larger version of it to get in more details, make any adjustments, just kind of make it cleaner and more finished. So generally, just start when you're doing that. When you're drawing by pencil, this same process applies with if you're drawing digitally as well. But rather than tracing over that drawing, you're just going to redraw it about 2 or 3 times larger. So this one's about 2 inches tall. So then this one is probably 7 to 8 inches tall. Okay, so just multiply it by 2 or 3 to get it bigger. So lay out all those basic shapes first. So I just basically laid it out lightly with pencil, about the same as I have in my composition for my thumbnail. And the second step, you just start to add more details. This is where you can look at reference photos of barns. I had a reference photo I was looking at to kind of help me with like the exact shape of the silo. What other details will I see on here? And then you eventually just keep adding details till you have a more finished looking illustration there. Okay, so there it is built up. And so you're going to need, if you have a scanner, that's kind of the best way to do it. If you don't, you can use your phone. So here's the one I took on with my phone. Remember, having in a well-lit room, not in direct sunlight, hold your phone a little bit a ways from it. Okay, that'll help to keep it from warping. I'm going to open this in Photoshop. There it is. All right. And in order to do this, I'm just going to make a new document, file new, and make it that size I want. So again, 8.5 by 11 inches, or 8 by 11 about, is usually a good go-to for your size. And make sure it's 300. Okay, I'll hit create. So there it is. I know this is the size of the document that I want. And I'll come back here, and I can take any of these selection tools. So I could do it with the lasso or with the rectangular marquee tool. It's kind of crooked there, which is fine. So I'll just use the polygonal lasso tool. And then to close up those selections, if you're using the polygonal one, just double click. Okay, I'm just going to copy and paste this. Command C, go over to my new one, and Command V. Okay, I do not need this anymore. Don't save. All right, so now I want to stretch this so it's big enough to fit here in the canvas. So Command T, stretch that bigger. I want to rotate it. Also, I'll push Enter. Still needs a little adjustments there. So just get it as close as you can. If you draw this frame around here, you know, with a ruler, it'll be a little bit more exact and perfect, but that's okay for now. All right. So now remember, we need to do a levels adjustment if you photograph your work, or if you scan it as well. So I want to get the color of this paper, which right now is kind of a light pinkish color, pinkish orangish color in slightly different spots. I'm going to get that as close as white as I can. So I'm going to go Command L, or image, adjustments, levels. Remember, this one samples the white here, so I'll sample that white. I go through this whole process in an earlier video, so if you need a reminder, you can go back and watch that. I get that line work just a little darker, not quite that dark. And blow out those whites a little bit. Okay. Yeah, that's probably fine. So let's name this drawing. And the biggest difference for this process is you have to change this layer to multiply. So it's right up here. You have to have the layer selected. Click up here. Change this to multiply. Again, what that does is it makes the whites transparent and the darks opaque. So we'll be able to see through the white and the line work will stay solid. Once I do that, I lock it because I no longer need that. Make a new layer. Flat color. All right, so we want to get rid of the white. So what I'm thinking for this one, it's a calmer scene, so that's why I included a bunch of negative space in there. So I don't want anything too bright or too saturated. I want something a little bit warmer because that feels, more inviting. I want this to feel kind of like a cozy location out here. So pinks are really nice. So, same with purples, purplish reddish. It could really be anything you want to start with. So I'm going to kind of start with monochromatic and see what happens. Oops. This with my opacity on my paint bucket was really low from the last project, so I'll just turn that up there. Okay, now we switch to the lasso tool and just start selecting out these shapes. So remember, separate positive space from the negative space first. And I can put a frame around this like I did on the previous one. So don't worry about coloring outside of the lines. So remember, just start those adjustments with values before you start messing with hue and saturation. Okay. So I'm going to just select this all with my magic wand tool. Remember that selects individual colors. I'm going to select that darker color, and I want to make these bushes behind it just a little darker. So now I just grabbed my hard round pressure size brush and I'm coloring in with that. You can color an entire composition that way. The more I think about it, this color scheme is looking pretty nice. Let's try a little bit more saturated color here for the grass. Grass can be ground planes and skies are really different areas that you can play around with that color. You can make a sky any sort of color. And really, since you can make it any color, making it a color that matches the mood of your story or your image. So what happens if we make this barn? So barns are usually red. I wasn't even thinking about that when I started, but see how this looks with a nice bright red on there. I'll keep that roof a little more desaturated. So I'm just going in each shape, separating it out, just slightly changing changing the hue, or no, not changing the hue, just changing the brightness and the saturation. So what color should we make this? Yeah, maybe a bright white or a lighter value there. Hit deselect there. I want this telephone pole. It's a little too dark. Let's be pretty dark there. So I expect you guys to kind of watch both these videos, see what sort of, what are these different ideas and tips that I'm giving you can use for your own. You don't need to use all of them. So I'm kind of just sticking with monochromatic here. I'm not adjusting my hue at all. I'm just adjusting the saturation and the value. So you can color the entire thing with a brush if you want. So I usually do a combination of the brush and then also using the selection tool. What do you guys think? How does that look? A little brighter for those trees there. So I'm just kind of playing around with and seeing what will work best to separate these shapes from each other. Again, I just selected the sky. So I usually like my clouds to be slightly saturated. I think it has a cool look to it. So try that for yours. If you have any clouds in there, you don't always have to do that. So again, I'm going to put a new frame around this. Not sure that color of the ground is working. I almost got all my shapes here. I got these little kind of, cars in the background, and actually I don't really need to change them. You know, if somehow I wanted to call attention to that car, or I wanted to stand out, then I would come and make this a bright green, but it's not really necessary for this piece here. Alright, and remember, as I mentioned earlier, these don't need to be super polished and finished. I just want to see you getting this creative process down, working with your layers over here, and then getting a good, harmonious, unified color scheme. Sometimes you'll notice when you're doing this method, let's see what happens. It doesn't happen. Well, never mind then. Sometimes if you suck up these colors and they are slightly different, it's because you're going through this drawing layer. So to get a more accurate color, you may have to turn that layer off and then suck up these individual colors. So make sure you guys watch both these videos because I add in different little tips and tricks in there. Let's throw in, before you get too far, throw in that hue saturation adjustment layer. And overall, I think that's working pretty well. So you can still change the color even with that layer on. I think if I just make that a little darker, that'll help. See how it looks with it off. Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay. So I won't go too much further with this, just so you guys can see the next couple steps. But I could continue to refine this if I want and adjust those individual colors. But let's lock that flat color layer for now and add a shadows layer. Alright. So let's get a nice shadow on here. That'll really help this give it a pop of 3 dimensions here. There we go, right on there. Deselect, select the red. Make it a little darker here. what I want to do is put the cast shadow here where the silo will cast a shadow right there on the barn. There we go. Let's get a little dimensions in these trees. So put a little bit darker shadow in here. Give them a nice 3D feel. I want the edge of this shadow to kind of feel broken up, loose, like it's made out of leaves. Alright, that's looking pretty good. They mentioned on the last one, subtle shadow here on the clouds. Let me show you guys. So I mentioned those texture brushes. So these ones were on the message I sent you. Let's see. This one I like a lot for grass. So again, if you do use any of these texture brushes, be subtle with them. I'm going to turn down the opacity a bit, make it a little bit bigger. The idea here is not to worry about drawing individual blades of grass, but just give it kind of a rough feel, a rough texture. Mess with the flow and the opacity till it gets a look that you like. I'm going to do this by going to turn the opacity up just so I can go right along this edge a little bit. Put a little texture right on that edge where the grass meets the path and where the grass meets the silo and the barn there. Alright, let's do a little gradient here in the sky. So usually skies are a little bit darker up top. Oops. I'm going to change it back to a linear gradient. There, that's better. A little bit darker up top and a little bit lighter towards the horizon. If you use gradients, keep them subtle. Let's see what this looks like with a levels adjustment on here. There we go. So throwing a levels adjustment on your art when you're almost done can be a good way to just kind of make those colors pop a little bit. Got a little bit more saturation in there, and adjust the darks and the lights just a little bit so you can see the difference there. All right, let's put a frame on here. Like I said, I just want to put some black in around that outside. So right now if I put black in, it will fill up that. But I can flip this and have the selection be out here. So if I made that rectangle selection, then I can go to Select, Inverse, and now put black right there. And we got a nice finished little piece of artwork. And I can go File, Save, Barn, Illustration. First I'll save it as a Photoshop file. There. So here's my Photoshop file. Now to get ready before I convert it to a PSD or before you send it to me for any feedback, we go File, Save As. Where is Save As? Oh, wrong file. Save As. JPEG, desktop. And go there. I always like to open it up as a JPEG because that's generally how someone else will see it. If I'm looking at it in an email or if you guys, before you save it as a PDF. So yeah, that looks pretty good. I like the overall color scheme. Yeah, I kind of like the looseness here where I'm not fitting in the lines exactly. I think that gives it kind of a good hand-drawn feel combined with the digital there. But watch both of those videos, kind of see all the different tips and tricks there, and then You don't need to use all of those tips and tricks, but kind of pick and choose and experiment and see which method will work best for you as you work on these. Okay, so this one is all monochromatic. It's all just those shades of red. And the previous one was a complementary color scheme with orange and blue.